All right, so I'm just going to go over this one question from page 289, number 1F for Math 20-1. So we're looking at this expression here that we need to multiply, and then the instruction is to express all products in the simplest form. So when we're multiplying, remember you multiply coefficients with coefficients and radicals with radicals. So this one has no coefficient on the outside, right? We're multiplying root 6t by this whole expression, 3t squared root t4, t over 4. And so because this has no coefficient, when we multiply, the coefficient will just be this one, so 3t squared. And then to multiply underneath the radical here, we're going to have 6t times by t over 4. So remember that's going to multiply across the top of this fraction. So it's going to be 6t times by t over 4. So that's going to simplify to 6t squared, but remember if we want to simplify, we can remove anything that's squared from underneath the radical and move it out to be a coefficient. So we have t squared here. So if we square root that, we can move it outside and multiply it by the 3t, or sorry, the 3t squared. So now we're going to have 3t squared times t is going to be t cubed. And then underneath the radical, we're still going to have 6 over 4. Now, the way I personally like to write this, just so I can think more easily about separating it into components that can be simplified, is that it's actually 6 times by a quarter, right? So now I can kind of think of this as two separate components. 6 can't be simplified in a way that can be like that can get a squared value that we can move outside. So 6 is going to stay the way it is, but a quarter, if you square root it, it's a half, right? So 1/2 times by 1/2 is equal to 1/4. So the square root of a quarter is a half, and so instead of a quarter, we could think of it as being a half times a half. So we know that when we have something that's squared, we move it outside and we only use one of those. So now we're going to have 1/2 times by 3t squared. And then we've eliminated that, so we just have a 6 underneath the radical. And then to write this in its simplest form, instead of multiplying these two together, remember you multiply the top value, like the numerator, by the number that's, or the term that's outside. So 1 times 3t squared is 3t squared, and then the 2 stays on the bottom, and then it's root 6. Okay, so that's how you would simplify that one.